And good morning and welcome into Talking About Art, your official kickoff to your weekend on Community Radio KMUZ Turner on both 88.5 and 100.7 FM. Well, this morning is kind of interesting and unique. Suffice it to say that we have the Room of Brilliance going on today. We have three folks at the microphones. Right off the top, we have Stephanie Lenox, Danielle Deulen, and Scott Nadelson. All three are teachers at Willamette University. Two out of the three are published poets, and we have a third prose writer, likewise published. They all have new and very successful books out there, and I want to welcome you all three in, Stephanie Lenox, Danielle Deulen, and Scott Nadelson. Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Good morning. Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. Absolutely. Well. Let me ask you this. For the two poets in the room, Stephanie Lenox and Danielle Deulen, why poetry? Of all of the art disciplines out there, what on earth what prompted you to choose poetry?
Love. I mean, really, I fell in love with poetry at such a young age.
How young?
I think reading my very first poem. I mean, even reading, something as simple as, When the Sidewalk Ends. Anything that rhymed, anything that had a certain musicality to the language, I was very drawn to. And most children are. I mean, if you think of it, lots of children's books are in rhymes and whatnot. But as I got just slightly older, maybe fourth grade, fifth grade, I remember one class in which I was introduced to Robert Frost's Walking Through the Woods on a Snowy Evening. At that young age, and I was just mesmerized by what it would do, especially the kind of sort of the melancholia at the end of that particular poem really struck me. I was sort of tired of silly rhymes, and that seemed to point to a kind of deeper emotionality that I hadn't experienced before, and I think I was sort of hooked from that point on.
That is really curious. Because I was struck by that exact same poem when I was probably about 10 or 11 years old in grade school, right? And that poem kicked off a series of visuals that led me down the track of becoming a fine art photographer.
Really?
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to hear that.
Oh, there's beautiful imagery in that poem, as well. I mean, it's really an exquisitely composed piece of work, and I think it's why it's simple, it's short, and it has that repeating line at the end, "and miles to go before I sleep." I think a lot of people can understand that weariness, no matter who they are in life. I mean, I was in the fourth grade. I knew nothing about weariness, really, at that time of my life. But it's still as good today as it was then. And I think I thought, I want to do something that good, that exciting, that would stick. I don't know if I'm ever going to achieve that, but it certainly remained a goal of mine. What about you, Stephanie?
I had a similar journey as a poet. I started really young, and I think I had a similar connection to that poem, but I also was raised in a fundamentalist Baptist church, and so my childhood was filled with the King James Bible, like these old-time hymns, and there's the rhythms of those that I feel like were really powerful to me in my writing life. And so in addition to Shel Silverstein and Robert Frost, I felt like there is this sort of epic pull as a child toward the cadences
and
of
Song of Solomon.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I have a story about Song of Solomon. I discovered that probably as a fourth grader in summer Bible camp, and I found some of the more risque sections of that, and I would read them to my friends, and we'd read them next to a window where the boys were passing by. That was as rebellious as I got as a child.
That's great. And Scott, what about you? Now, it's not poetry, but
and I came to writing a bit later than that, but I did come to poetry first, actually.
Yeah.
I was late in high school, and I was one of those kids who was not interested in school very much. I did well in it, but I didn't connect to much. And language didn't really mean that much to me until I really came to it through music. I was in high school and discovered my father's collection of Bob Dylan records, and I listened to a lot of early hip-hop, and suddenly language started to make sense in a way. And I think what I wanted to be was a rock star, but I had no musical talent. So then I came to poetry, and it was, I remember the day, I was a junior in high school and sitting in English class, and we read T.S. Eliot's The Hollow Men and Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, and it was as if flashes were going off.
Classics,
so
both.
I tried to write some poetry for a while, and I wasn't. That was not my skill. And I found story early in my college career, and as soon as I hit that vein of narrative, it felt so right to me. Just telling stories, trying to tell them in the simplest way possible to get to the greatest depth, and I've never turned back since.
You know, as I was doing research for this morning here, I read through a good part of what you have posted, online and that sort of thing. And what I was especially struck by was the diversity of your writings, poetry in particular, of course, and yours as well. And I'm wondering, do you happen to have samples at all with you today that you can read so the audience can hear the diversity of each person's style? Scott, would you like to start?
Sure. I will. I'll just read the opening paragraph of this new novel I have just out last November. The book is called Between You and Me, and this opening chapter is called Girl Made of Metal, 1981. The Rockaway Mall movie theater still had only 6 screens, tucked between the Bambergers and the video arcade. It would be a few more years before another 6 were built, in a strip mall annex beside the Sizzler that dropouts from Morris Knowles High School would later accidentally burn down during a burglary. Those new screens would have plenty of parking spaces, separated as they were from the main complex. But this afternoon, a rainy Sunday in early July, Paul Haberman had to compete for spots with every shopper in Morris County, every teenager playing asteroids and smoking cigarettes and trying to look fearsome.
Definitely 80s.
Yeah.
I'll read a new poem from one of my from my new collection, which is called "Our Emotions Get Carried Away Beyond Us." It's a very short poem and a little bit atypical for the rest of the book, though it follows along with some of the more political themes that I have going on in the piece. I composed it right after the Sandy Hook school shooting, which made me quite heartbroken. And this is called "American Curse." May dark soldiers lead you through the mountains. May you find the criminal weeping in his hands. May the scent of whiskey rise from your horses. May you build your mansion in the sands. May the beauty of your children be too great for kindness. May the forest reappear when you close your eyes. May your dogs grow wild as your heart grows tame. May your bullet always meet with its aim.
Okay. Stephanie?
And I will read a poem from The Business, which is my new collection that came out in November as well. And my collection is mostly inspired by my time spent as an administrative assistant. And so a lot of my poems have to deal with work and with coworkers and interactions that take place within a contemporary office place. So this is called Secretaries in Heaven. This is their new office, alphabetizing clouds, creating a database of prayers received, prayers answered, shooing cherubs off the Xerox, the green beam churning out one perfect copy after another. They have taught the saints how to multitask. Their pearl drop fingernails take dictation. There is no need for correction fluid since they've arrived. Heaven couldn't be better. The souls over their endless coffee mugs joke about who's really in charge. Death has been delegated to them completely. They're just so efficient. The pink stubs of their number 2s descending from the heavens in a swift swipe of erasure. The afterlife requires such meticulousness. It is their business, perpetually sending out memos to the living. They know everything under the sun. Calves bejeweled in shimmering nylon that never runs, eyelids iridescent. They whisper in their cubicles. They know who's next. Here, in this chorus of machines, the tone-deaf copier, the cacophony of the fax, the golden swing lines thump and thud, they wait for us. Their round rumps on roller chairs that skim across the great, desperate spaces, so organized, so detail-oriented, singing, "Hallelujah, this is heaven. Please hold."
Where does that sarcasm come from?
Where does it comes from survival. It comes from surviving many, many years in an office place. So.
Boy, do I know that. I've spent my share of time in corporate America for, a number of companies, and that just rings absolutely true. Especially the one about, the folks in the cubicle knowing who's next.
Right.
I mean, there's always that undercurrent of politics.
Right.
And who's gonna lose it today?
Yes.
And who's gonna be walking through that front door tomorrow?
Right.
That type of thing, and who we're gonna have to train.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And Danielle, I am struck by the litany of. It's sort of a. What can I say? It's part biblical, building your house on the sand, but this litany of gentle, man, why don't you just up and die, type of an approach, to the one who instigated the event at Sandy Hook.
Yeah, I was researching this Sandy Hook school shooting, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I also was trying to distract myself from that, and I came across, a quote that it is often attributed to Chinese culture, may you live in interesting times. Mm-hmm. And so then I started to distract myself. I started looking to see if that was true, what was the direct translation, that sort of thing. And I found that it was actually apocryphal. There isn't a quote from the Chinese that matches that or necessarily could. So I thought, well, that's strange. Ultimately, it's a curse in English that we attribute to the Chinese. And I thought, well, what would an authentically American curse? We don't think of ourselves as being a kind of ethnicity as a nation very often, and curses, I think, we often think of as happening in other countries, and so I started to think, what would an authentically American curse look like, if we claimed it? And so I had to write that series of various curses, and of course, I couldn't help but get down to the end of that and think about that particular person.
After writing that, do you feel, well, I don't know, relieved, as it were? Yeah, I mean, I know that's a horrible question. It really is. I
don't know necessarily that it's cathartic for me, but it's writing is how I make any kind of sense of anything, So I don't know that I necessarily feel relieved so much as clearer on how I feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What has your audience reacted at all to that particular poem?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a few readings, since the book has come out, and people usually, when they come up to speak to me afterwards, they usually note that mm-hmm. particular poem. And it's been mentioned in a couple of reviews, so I thought it would be a good one to read today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Scott, why the 80s? Why not the 70s?
So this book goes through actually from the early 80s, 1981 until 2001. It covers 20 years in the life of this man, Paul Haberman. And it was a way for me to look back at my childhood, I think, and also to project myself forward. I started writing this book just before my daughter was born, and I think all my anxieties about becoming a parent were close to the surface. And as a way of dramatizing that, I wrote a story about a man who has been a bachelor until he was 40, and then meets a woman with 2 young kids and becomes a stepfather. And it's suddenly he goes one day from being a bachelor to one day having a family already fully formed, and he doesn't know what to do with it.
Is this autobiographical?
Well, this was my imagining,
Okay.
So the character is based on my father's biography, but the character, I think, has more of me internally in him than anybody else.
Yeah. Huh. You guys are all 3 teachers at Willamette University. You've got an event, Stephanie. You've got an event coming up.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Okay, I'm so excited about this. Next Thursday, April 14th at 7 p.m. at Frozation Nation, my students will be reading as part of the Salem Poetry Project. That's an ongoing reading series that takes place there every Thursday. But my poetry students will be reading from poets that they have been following all semester long. And these are great voices of the 20th century: Audre Lorde, Etheridge Knight, Elizabeth Bishop, Galway Kinnell, Gwendolyn Brooks, and a total of 9 poets in all that they'll be reading from. And I think it's a great way to introduce these powerful voices to an audience that is already interested in poetry. So it's just a way to share those voices of inspiration.
So Frozation, now, by the way, Frozation is located at the Salem Arts Building right downtown.
Right.
And it is, and I don't know exactly the address, but it's something like 140 or 145.
Yeah, 155 is
like
sticking
that.
in my head. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And they have hosted the Poetry Project for these many months now. It's been a real, boost to the community, to the poet community as well. So this is going to occur one more time. When?
On Thursday, April 14th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
And it's a free event. It's open to the public, and there's an open mic that follows the official reading.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like you've got about 9 students?
Right.
Okay. And each one has chosen a particular author, and they've been working their material.
Right.
For this
They've been following these authors by reading three books by them, reading critical text about them, and then writing poems in inspiration or in imitation of these poets all semester long.
Really? So will they be reading both the author that they're emulating along with their own poetry?
If they're doing their own poetry, they'll do that during the open mic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're trying to keep them separate as a way to just share the voices first,
Yeah.
and then share other people's original work later.
Yeah. Oh, that's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I'm excited about it.
Man, I guess so. They've had some extraordinary poets. And of all places at Frozation Nation.
I know,
Good heavens.
I know.
Who would have thought?
I know.
That raises kind of a curious question in my mind, given the fact that you are all 3 teachers. Let me talk about your students. What sort of students do you get in? Now, I know that's kind of a bland question, but they come in from all walks of life. But why do they come knocking on your door?
It's a huge range. So I've been teaching at Willamette since 2004, and over the years, I have found that the one thing that's consistent is that people come to creative writing for a variety of reasons, from the random to the very intentional. So there's some students who come to us having written from being 10 years old all the way through high school, and they can't wait to get into a creative writing classroom. Others take our classes because we have a wonderful creating in the arts requirement as part of their general education curriculum, that all students at Willamette take a class in the arts. So we get some chemistry majors, biology majors who are terrified of the arts and think that creative writing is the one place, at least, that they can manage to get through. And then they get in the classroom and they start to fall in love with poetry or with prose. Or right now I'm teaching screenplays, and they've all watched films, and their eyes are opening up, seeing these movies that they've watched all their lives in a completely new way. So a great variety of reasons and motivations for people taking our classes.
Let me ask all 3 of you this. When, as Scott says, he recognizes that a different light goes on. They may have come in as chemistry majors, but halfway through the first month of your class, say, they're going, this is different. I love this. Is there a way that I can, as a student, perhaps go down the track of incorporating this into my life along with chemistry? Or maybe should it be 50-50? Can I do both chemistry and poetry out there in the real world? How do you respond to that student? Danielle? Or pardon me, Danielle, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if they love it, then probably they're working hard at it. That's the idea. I think that sometimes there's this misconception attached to the idea of talent. That if you have some sort of regular knack for something, and that you don't necessarily have to work at it as hard as other people. And I think that's extremely misleading, especially for young writers, that one of the things that I tend to emphasize is, well, if you love this, then you should be working very hard at it, right? As far as incorporating writing into a life outside of writing as well, I'd love for a student to go on and get their full degree, their doctorate in chemistry, and also still be a poet. That would be amazing. I think that the more sort of diverse thinking you have in any particular field, especially interdisciplinary thinking, really creates something beautiful in the arts. If you had a doctorate chemist who was also a poet, I would love to read those poems. What would they look like? But that fostering that love is fostering the work ethic in whatever subject you choose. And that even if somebody has a kind of quote-unquote talent for something, that really you're going to find the love in the work.
Yeah, very good. That's the fundamental of a liberal arts education. Mm-hmm. That was the whole, thrust and focus about that. And the other thing is that how many times, time and time again, do we recognize the fact that there is the artist and the poet in the scientist? Right. And there is truly, when you get down to it, there is no division. There is no left brain, right brain.
Right.
Well,
truly high thinking in the sciences requires creative thinking, right? They're coming up with new ideas, there are new hypotheses, all of that. So I think in any discipline that you're talking about, those kinds of critical and analytical and creative skills can be put to good use.
Mm-hmm. And Stephanie, what do you tell your students?
Well, one of the first things that I do on day one of class is I bring a stack of composition notebooks, and they're just the plain cheapest notebooks that you can find, and I hand them out to my students, and I tell them that they are going to write in this every single day. And we talk about the habit of art, that it's not just something you wait for and you wait to be inspired, but you do it a little bit every day and see what happens. And some days are going to be terrible, and some days you're going to surprise yourself. And they don't believe me at first. And then I keep them working at it, doing it day after day. And at some point, there's that little light bulb that comes on. And I've had students who come back to my office after they've had my class and ask for another notebook. Because I think they think there's something magical in these 99-cent notebooks I give to them.
There is.
Yeah. And I believe in the gift. I give them a gift, and I expect them to use it. And so there's this sense of obligation that they have. And then another thing I do to promote that habit of art is I lead a writing group on campus in the campus coffee shop. And Monday through Friday, we meet there 4:30 to 5:30 and just write. We don't share what we write. We don't talk about what we write. We don't even really talk to each other. But we just sit and write in each other's presence. And I think that supportive